Hello, and welcome to School to Homeschool. My name is Janae
Hello,
Daniels.
and welcome to
I'm a
School
wife,
to
a mother
Homeschool.
of six, and a
I am
former
Janae
middle
Daniels.
school
I'm
teacher
a wife,
turned
a mother of
homeschool
6,
mom.
and a former
I
middle
have
school
kids
teacher
in their
turned
20s,
homeschool
all the way
mom.
down to elementary
I have
age
kids
and
in their 20s
everything
all
in
the way down to
between.
elementary
Are
age
you
and
thinking
everything
about
in
pulling your kids
between.
from the public school
Are you
system
thinking
like
about
I did,
pulling your
but
kids
you
from
are
the school
scared
system
to
like
death
I
and
did,
don't know what to
but
do
you're
next?
scared to death
My
and
friends,
don't know what
I
to do
felt
next?
the exact
My
same
friends,
way.
I felt the same
And
way,
you've come to
and
the
you
right
have come
place.
to the right
I want
place.
to help your family
I want to help
leave
your
the system
family leave
so that
the
you
system
can take the hearts
so that you
and
can take
minds
the
of your
hearts and
children
minds of
back.
a little judgmental right this second for half a second. So bear with me. You know, I'm not perfect. So this is what happened. I was on Instagram, and lo and behold, a reel pops up. Maybe I was on YouTube. I can't remember. Anyway, I was on one of the platforms, just browsing like people do when I had a few minutes of waiting time, and this reel or a short popped up, and it was this cute little mom, you know, who has these little tiny boys, showing the start to their homeschooling day and doing her homeschooling space. And so she in the short, it's like 15 seconds long, and she's like, here, I'm wiping down my perfectly white manicured desks for each of my children, their little table in our homeschooling room, and I'm wiping down our whiteboard, and I'm wiping down like my chalkboard painted wall, and I'm arranging all of their cute little books, and then I'm going to make breakfast for my kids, and then I'm going to exercise and everything. Now, I'm being so judgmental, right? I'm being so judgmental right now, but I watched it and I'm like, that is not my life, right? So today I want to talk about homeschooling space and the space in our homes that we actually homeschool in. Because I feel like sometimes when we watch Instagram, it feels artificial. And we see these very well-intending moms showing their perfectly manicured homeschooling spaces with their perfectly manicured children. And I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, that's not my life. That's not what it looks like. That's not reality for me. And so I want to talk about, like, how do we design a homeschooling space? And do we even need to? And then on Facebook, shortly following that, by the way, on Facebook, somebody in one of the, I can't remember, one of the Facebook pages, the homeschooling Facebook pages, somebody posted, can somebody show me pictures of your homeschooling space? Because I'm trying to design mine, and this is what I want to do. And they want an Instagram worthy homeschooling room in their heads. And there's no shame to that. More power to you. And my response was, my homeschooling, I'm not going to send you a picture, but my homeschooling space looks an awful lot like a kitchen table and a couch. And so, everybody has this notion of what they want their home to look like and their homeschooling space to look like. So let's talk about that. How do we design our space? If you're coming out of the public school system, my guess is probably that you haven't even thought about this other than like, where are we going to do school, right? And so let's talk about this. So in my heart of hearts, I am a minimalist. Deep in my soul, I am a minimalist. Unfortunately, reality and my soul do not always match. And I am not the most organized person. I'm a super artistic person. I'm a super creative person, but I'm not the most organized person. I grew up with an amazingly creative mother who also was not organized and was kind of a terrible housekeeper. Sorry, Mom, but she was not a good housekeeper. And we helped and we had our chores, but our house felt like it was always a mess. Contrast that with me marrying somebody who is ultra obsessive compulsive about cleanliness. His mother vacuums twice a day. His grandmother, who's 100 years old and in great physical condition, still drives an SUV, and she vacuums, and I'm not joking, 4 times a day, and she dusts every day, multiple times a day. Right. So here we have our worlds come together, colliding, and now we're somewhere in the middle. We're not super duper organized, and yet our house compared to what I grew up in is very, very clean. Again, compared to what I grew up in, but we have clutter, right? And I try to minimize that. Like I said, in my heart, I'm a minimalist, but I feel like I'm perpetually decluttering because somehow the clutter just multiplies. It just does. It multiplies, and I'm perpetually going, okay, let's gather stuff and go to Goodwill. And then on top of that, when you have 4 kids that are living at home, actually we have 5 kids right now at home, but my oldest son does his own laundry. My kids actually know how to do their laundry. The littles are still learning, so I still help with their laundry. But their laundry somehow multiplies, and then they grow bigger, and then we're perpetually going through their clothes. Tell me you've been through this, where you're like, oh my gosh, now we have to go through their clothes again. Already, it's that time of year. It's clothes going through time. So when we started homeschooling, part of my concern was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Now, I have a nice big house. Honestly, like I'm at that point in my life. My husband does very well financially. Not everybody has that, but even having a good size house, I didn't want to turn, anything into like a homeschooling room. I didn't want to sacrifice the guest bedroom that we have to be a homeschooling room because we have guests all the time. And so I thought, well, what can we do? And we have this little kitchenette area in our basement. So initially, like our plan was that would be our homeschooling table. And that's what we would use. That would be our homeschooling table. And I put up a map on the wall, even though to my chagrin, I'm like, oh, I really want to do a beautiful collage of our family, but I feel this need to make a classroom in the basement because that's what you do in public school. And slowly but surely, the kids started moving upstairs. Like we'd start homeschooling, and slowly but surely, their stuff and themselves ended up on the floor doing their homework, at the kitchen table doing their homework. If I was cooking something, they'd want to be in the kitchen with me doing their homework. I say homework, like their homeschool work. They'd want to read wherever. They'd want to be on the couches. And the reality is they didn't want to do homeschooling in a specific area. They didn't. They wanted kind of to be free. And at the same time, as I'm trying out the bajillion different curriculums that I was trying out, I'm finding that stuff is multiplying like socks. Like I have so much homeschooling stuff that I'm like, what do I do with all this stuff? It's like everywhere. And my husband noticed that our house was getting more and more cluttered. In the meantime, as I mentioned, I'm a minimalist in my heart, but really I'm kind of a book hoarder. So I'm perpetually buying. I'm like, oh, we need this book or we need that book. At the beginning, it was like, I need all these curriculums. And so I bought these curriculums, and then I'm like, where do we put everything? Where do we put everything? And I have a good size house. But what do you do when you don't have a good size house? What do you do when you have an apartment? What do you do? And it's a 2-bedroom apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment. Well, if you've got kids, hopefully it's bigger than a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment. Or what do you do when you have a 1,000 square foot house or a 1,200 square foot house? So this is something that's been on my mind. So what we ended up falling on is that for me, I made a distinct decision. I was feeling pressure to like, do I paint my walls? Do I buy all these extra maps? Do I turn my home into a big fat public school classroom? And as I watched my kids over the beginning months, I realized they didn't want that. They wanted to be at home. That's why they were lounging on the floor when they were working on their handwriting. That's why my daughter curled up in a blanket and had her hot chocolate as she was reading Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice. She loves Jane Austen, by the way. So she wanted to be snugly in as she read and as she did her work. My son he bought his own computer. He loves doing video editing, and he wanted to lay on the ground to video edit. And I realized we don't need a specific homeschooling space per se to homeschool. You don't need to put a whiteboard in your dining room. You don't need to paint any walls with chalkboard paint unless you want to. I mean, let's say you're like, no, my dream is to have, I saw on Pinterest, like I really want a cute homeschooling. Then great, awesome. What's more important to me, I found, is that we have a functional space and that there is a specifically designed home for their books, for the curriculum that they do have, and get rid of the curriculum that you're not keeping. Okay, if you're like, this isn't working for us, part of me for the longest time, I held on to all the curriculum. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, we had a family reunion. I boxed up all the curriculum that we weren't using, that was not my favorite, boxed it all up, took it to the family reunion, and I have a sister that homeschools now. I'm helping her with that. And then another sister whose kids are littles, and she's thinking about homeschooling. And then a niece who really wants to homeschool her littles. And so I took all the three big boxes, and I said, okay, have at it. It's all yours. You can have it. Because realistically, we're not using it anymore. Or we're done with this little reading program that my 7-year-old went through. It's called Dot and Dash. Super cute, but we're finished. We're finished with the first set, and she doesn't need it anymore. And I had to say goodbye to it. That part of me was like, no, I need to keep it all. But really, if you're not using it, get rid of it. So then I ended up buying a bookshelf and put the extra curriculum, perhaps like that. Again, those of you who've been on the podcast before know I'm what's called an eclectic homeschooler, meaning I don't adhere to one homeschooling philosophy. I don't use curriculums for everything. I do a lot of unschooling with the kids, but we also do some Charlotte Mason, and there's pieces of the classical method that I also like, teaching reason, logic, and rhetoric. But the books that we had and the extra school supplies, I just put on this shelf. And as the shelf gets full, I've started to empty it and get rid of it. And then I have bookshelves for children's books and for literature that my kids want to read. And I have to stop myself from buying it and remember, just go to the library. Just go to the library, Janae. Just go to the library, and then you can take it back. And that way it doesn't accumulate in your home. Okay, so as you are creating your homeschool space, keep a couple things in mind. Remember, less is more. And I've been trying to preach this. Again, in my heart of hearts, I am a minimalist. And so I have to fight myself and go, no, we don't need to keep this stuff. So what I discovered is when you start getting rid of curriculum that you're not using, it doesn't accumulate as much. The second thing that I started doing is I created a designated spot for my kids' current things that they're using. For example, my son is reading Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. He's reading economics in one lesson. And then he's got his computer. He's got his copywork, Spiral. And then he's got our planner that we use every day. And then I've got my Planning from Behind planner as well, which I'll show those in another episode. And then my other kids, my little has a math curriculum. My 10th grader and my 6th grader have stuff on the computer, but then they each have our homeschooling space of how much room we actually need for our homeschooling books and stuff for all 4 children, high school down to kindergarten, is only about 3 feet wide. And I keep it in the kitchen next to the computer in a little spot. And my husband and I are like, this is the homeschooling spot. And then we have 2 small baskets of art supplies that are good art supplies. I've got Prismacolor pencils, I've got some markers. And then I do have a little closet in our basement that we save other art supplies in. That's it. And then our bookshelves that we have, our literature on. But it's pretty simple. And I haven't turned my home into a public school classroom. And I haven't done that because my kids want to be at home. They want to feel like they are at home. Have you ever noticed how in public school classrooms, particularly in elementary schools and some middle schools, they'll turn like a corner into like a reading nook, and they'll put, I see a lot of teachers like have a comfy couch, or they'll have beanbag chairs, and they'll have a rug and a soft lamp, and they're trying to imitate home. So why families feel a need to imitate school is beyond me. Because so much more, there's such a feeling of coziness and love when we're at home that I believe it inspires and invites a better learning environment for our kids when they feel snugly and warm and like they're at home and not necessarily at school. And I had to learn that the hard way. Again, at the beginning, we had our basement, and now it's back to normal. And our living room and our dining room and our kitchen and the living room floor and sometimes their bedrooms all are the places that they do school. Sometimes on the stairs is where they do school. And then they put their stuff away. So we have a small 3-foot space where we keep all of their books. Okay. I do have a little cupboard that I keep extra supplies in, extra pencils, and we don't go overboard in school supplies. Literally this year, I bought a few spiral notebooks. I replenished some markers. I got pens and pencils. That was it. And I did buy glue sticks, and that was pretty much it. And then I got out the books and made a list of the books that they would be reading this year as the bulk of their curriculum. And so each of them, again, they're literature books, not necessarily like curriculum, except with the exception of like handwriting and things like that. So a 3-foot space, that's what I needed. Something that I've done in the past for homeschooling space is I've just taken a small basket or bin, depending on the year, and just put, each child had their own, and we put all their stuff in it. And when they were done with it, they put all their stuff in the basket, and they put it in a cabinet, underneath a counter, and we called it good. And we made a small space for it. But it shouldn't have to take up your entire house, nor do you necessarily want it to look like public school. We're trying to avoid that, right? We don't want to repeat school at home, because that system, by the way, is not effective. So the other thing is there's this word called hygge. It's a Danish word, and the closest translation means like cozy and comfy. And I first was introduced to this word from the book The Brave Learner by Julie Bogart, who is kind of the homeschooling guru. Her kids are all adults. And she talked about like how wonderful it is when you're at home and you have cozy blankets and it's wintertime and you have candles lit and there's snacks and cookies and fun little treats for them to eat as they're working. And it brings in that coziness, that warmth, that hygge, right? Something about that brings magic to the homeschooling experience. That's one of my kids' favorite things about homeschooling is they love to be able to snuggle and get out snacks and work at their pace and do what they need to do and get their stuff done and work on the things that they love in an environment where they feel cozy and safe and happy and bring up all those feelings of warmth and home, right? Where they feel at home. That whole word evokes this desire for love and comfort and security. So as you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your space, keep that in mind. Like what is the intention that you want? Like, what do you want your home to feel like? Do you want it to feel sterile like a school? Do you want it maybe portioned? Do you want it to feel sterile? How do you want to work this? That is totally up to you. For me, I wanted to maintain that feeling of home, that feeling of cozy, that feeling of love and just security. Now, I have a very good friend. Her name is Nicole Schiffler, and she is very intentional about creating spaces in her home. And I've been to her home. She runs the Empowered Homeschooling coaching group. She's fabulous. She's an unschooler and I consider her a very, very dear friend. And I loved her home. One of the things that was very important to their family was having a dedicated room for creativity and art. And she has, many of her children are definitely artists, and she loves art. You know, she was an art history major. And so when they moved into their new home, and they had to downsize significantly when they moved into their new home, they turned the office into like an art room. And it's this small room, and it has all the art supplies easily accessible for the kids to see. And it's neat and tidy. And that's the place that they go if her girls are wanting to weave, or if the kids are wanting to paint, and it's all there. And that was something that was really, really important for their family. So as you're designing this, you have to decide, you and your spouse, if you have a spouse, if you don't, like, you have to decide. If you're a single parent, that's okay too. Like, decide, what intention do you want your home to be? Like, how do you want those spaces to be? And you can be like Nicole, who's like, no, we want a dedicated like art room. You could be like the mom on Instagram that I was teasing just a little bit. I was being a little snarky, who wanted an actual school room, you know. You could be like me, who's like, yeah, guess what? You're like, home is what it is. We're not putting up a chalkboard. We can use, by the way, we can use the sliding glass door and use dry erase markers on it. And it's kind of cool. And the kids like to write on it, right? That's an option for us. And so it doesn't matter what you choose, but choose something that you want. Choose something that works for your family. I would suggest, again, minimizing your homeschooling stuff. You don't need everything. You're going to get stressed, right? The more stuff we have, the more stressed we get. I'm a big fan of Peter Walsh, who wrote It's All Too Much, and Marie Kondo. Again, like I said, in my heart, I'm a minimalist. In practice, totally not. But I appreciate what they have to say, that like, you only have the space that you have, and extra stuff causes extra stress. So get rid of the homeschooling stuff you're not using, give it to another family, sell it, give it to Goodwill, whatever you need to do, and keep only the stuff that's the most essential. If you're like, no, I need to keep this because I've got other kids coming through, great. And then find specific areas, create a specific area for your homeschooling stuff, and teach and train your children to put their stuff back when they're done. And then call it good. And then clean up each afternoon, and have them put their stuff back in whatever designated spot. But create a small designated spot. And maybe that's just one basket for all your kids. We're just going to get one of those square, baskets, and that's what and we can move it around the house if we need to. And if we have company, we can put it in a bedroom, but it's one basket, right? That is a possibility for you. And that's enough. Whatever you choose is right if it works for you. It's your choice, and it's your choice how to do it. The other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to fill my home with beautiful art. And that's something that's been really important. And I do want to display my children's pictures. So there is an area in our home where I have strung some string, and we clip up their pictures so that they can see some of the artwork that they've created. And that's fun, and I can take it down easily. I can put it up easily. It's not permanent. But I love beautiful art, and I want my home to feel like it's beautiful and a place that's inviting for my kids. So like I said, for us, we keep it very simple, and we just have that 3-foot space at the computer desk in our kitchen, and that's where I keep all the homeschooling stuff, and that's it. Like, it's very simple, because I want my home to be a home of learning and love and joy and hygge and comfort. That's what I want. I don't want to replicate the public school system. That's just me. Again, everybody's different, and whatever you choose is right. And guess what? If it's not working, you get to change it. You know why? Because you're homeschooling, and you can. That's the good news. So, takeaways for today. Get rid of stuff that you don't need. Get rid of the homeschooling stuff that you don't need. And find a designated little home for your kids' stuff and call it good. And that's enough. Okay? I hope you have a great week, my friends. I know this one is shorter than normal, but it's something that I feel like I needed to address. One of my listeners reached out and said, hey, can you do one on a homeschooling space? Because I'm really struggling because the stuff is ending up everywhere. And so that's why I'm doing it this week is find a designated spot for their stuff, keep it small, keep it simple, or put it in a basket, call it good, and then teach your kids to put their stuff away. With that, have a great week. Mamas, you're doing good. Know that you're doing good, even though you feel
If you enjoyed this today, please like and subscribe. You could also join our private Facebook group at School to Homeschool or sign up for our newsletter at www.schooltohomeschool. Have a great day.